and people will come in as they come in. First of all, apparently we did have it down, and Mike Ventrill, apparently you had it down for 7 on this, and I had it down at 8 for the invitation. So we apologize if that caused us any difficulty on the time. I see where the confusion was. I couldn't understand why everybody was confused because I only ever had it at 8 o'clock on the e-bike. Anyway, so we're going to talk tonight about our patients out of balance with our friend and DCM, Dr. John Comisi. Now, as if you haven't been here for a while, you may not know that we now can get, or giving up CE, continuing education credits, PSAGD, for our masterminds. Now, masterminds are not a lecture. Masterminds are for all of us to talk. And so please, I really appreciate, the discussion. Rather than just shoving something in the chat box, it really helps. You say it out loud, ask questions. It's about conversation. Patty B, you're there. You're going to keep track of the chat box?
I will do my best.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. In order to get a continuing education credit, takes 2 things. We need to have a course description as well as your name. So I want you all at this point now to go to the chat box and please enter your name, because that will give you your official that you attended this mastermind, and that's how we keep track to our record keeping. So go ahead and start putting that in the chat box now. If you don't get it in there, then we won't be able to give you the CE credit. So I will go through.
I'm doing this through audio. I'm sorry, I'm doing this through audio only, and I don't have a way of accessing that.
Okay. If you can send me a note, then I will add you. Okay. Everybody should have
Thank you.
email. Okay. Thanks. So we have all our guests and all our people. I'm not going to go through this because we have other people that have signed in that we didn't get. I do want to announce right now that our next mastermind, I know that's really close to the holidays, yet the reality of it, it's tough to have 2 meetings in a week. So our next mastermind is on the 18th of December. That will be at 7 p.m. Central. And it's going to be dental and medical cross-coding with Kendra Sellers and myself. So we've got some exciting information that we want to share that's going to be a little more specific to coding, but it's really more about the ideas of what it takes to do dental medical dental cross-coding, because every practice can possibly do it, and we're going to introduce the how of that. I hope you got your newsletter. You probably got 2. The reason why is that we had, we're still in the middle of perfecting some of our systems, and we, all of the members are also on our my broad general list. So if you got the 5 reasons to become a dental codologist and you already are, you're going, how come I got that? Well, it was easier just to send it to everybody than edit you out. But the other one, the dental codologist who has the insurance, is a beautiful thing with the punk in there. That was the member version. We'll be having member versions that are different with a lot more tips and specifics in them as we continue to build our member portal. The member portal is got some really exciting changes coming. They're not quite finished, but they are coming very quickly. I do want to announce and congratulate everybody that's on here that are also part of the Dental Codologist Consortium. We're kind of calling that group, and any of you are welcome to be on the DCC. The DCC is the group that's committed to submitting for changes in addition to the codes and really being proactively involved. We're calling it the elite force, bit of the special forces. And I'm proud to say that as of the end of last week, our DCC submitted 19 submissions for changes and additions to the CDT code. The next DCC meeting will be in December, on December 9th. Now, if you're wondering why we would still need meetings if we put our submissions in, is one of the goals of our group is to have more of a voice on the coding committee, whether it's the hygienists, the assistants, office managers. We believe all of those, we would be a stronger, richer profession if all of us had a voice. So what we do is we behave as if. What does that mean? Well, we get all the submissions that are published online at the American Dental Association website on December 1st, and we behave as if. What that means is we decide and we vote on them as if we were members of that committee. Because once we become members of the committee, we will be looking at all of the things that get voted on. So anyway, if you're interested in becoming a member of the DCC or you're joining in that group, again, it's a subgroup of the dental codologist membership. Just get a hold of me and I'll add you to the invitation list. Okay. Again, I want to give John as much time as possible tonight so that we can really have much more of a discussion. But so this is your reminder. So please put in your first and last name in the chat box so that you can get your continuing education credit. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you early on because I know you will get our discussion going and we will have a very interesting time here together. So go for it, John.
All right, thank you very much, Patty. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. When Patty asked me to do this, we started trying to figure out what would be a really interesting topic for everybody to consider. And one of the things that I like to talk about when I'm out on the lecture circuit is discussing whether or not our patients are out of balance. And how do you recognize that? And what do you do for them? So that's one of the things that I really like to talk about. I'm very interested in cariology. I'm very interested in caries management. And how do we communicate that to the patients so that this way they can benefit from our knowledge and our expertise? Let's go to the next slide. Okay. A few years back, I had the opportunity to write this article for Inside Dentistry, and it was entitled Oral Disease, the Battle for Balance. And one of the first things that I discussed in the article was that I'm sure many of you, I know I have countless times had your patients tell you that my teeth have always been soft. And frankly, teeth aren't soft. It's just that somebody somewhere long ago probably told our patients as a way of explaining why they couldn't control their caries. And it's an interesting factor, and it's probably a bunch of you have heard this over the course of time. So let's go on to the next slide. So the fundamentals here basically are that caries, in dental caries, is an incredibly complex disease and it's the most prevalent disease on the planet. And it's also the most preventable. But as healthcare professionals, we're missing something, or somehow we as American clinicians have missed something. And our job pretty much is to try to figure out how to help our patients. Next slide, Patty. Because the mouth has become a battle zone between the protective of the good guys and the pathologic forces, the bad guys. And so you and I are on the forefront of trying to control the battle and maybe stem the tide onto the good guys and help our patients out in whatever way that we possibly can. But one of the hardest things, of course, for us to do is deal with what's on this next slide and how do we help our patients. And that's sugar. This is an epidemic situation, or this sugar is contained in practically every food substance that we ingest nowadays. And interestingly enough, when a listing by the ADA was done not terribly long ago to try to identify ways of preventing disease, there's all kinds of things like silver diamine fluoride put on there, fluoride varnish, sealants, et cetera, and so forth. Nowhere in that listing was curtailment of sugar. And that's a question that you and I have to try to figure out what to do with overall. So I'm sure that you may struggle with it because I have a sugar addiction. I think many of us probably do as well. And we need to identify that and probably help our folks manage that. And then it comes down to some other things, such as on our next slide.
Sorry, you didn't
You
move.
go to the next one.
There it is.
Yeah. There you go. And that's time. The amount of time that patients have the sugar in their mouth, and also the amount of time that's gone by since their tooth first erupted into their mouth. Your patients and mine, I know I've got a lot of patients, and now that I'm at the university, I see a lot of patients that don't think that their teeth, that they think their teeth are the same as they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They don't see dentistry, or they don't see the dental oral cavity as something that is manifesting the effects of time. So I think we need to look at this in a way to understand that the way that you and I are today are certainly different from just a year ago or 10 years ago. And maybe we have to help our patients understand that the way that they were able to get away with things a little while ago is not the way they're able to do it now, because they may be on all kinds of medications, which causes all kinds of dry mouth factors and other issues. So it's a big problem. And speaking of dry mouth, next slide. We'd have to look at saliva deficiencies. And I know personally from reviewing medical history after medical history, as many of you do, the multitude of medications that our patients are on. And, mostly we expect it with our senior patients, but there's also a lot of middle-aged and younger people who are on all kinds of interesting meds. And saliva deficiency is the key killer of teeth. And it's the key mechanism of driving the overall caries process forward at almost a light year pace of activity. I'm sure many of you see this. I know that I have for a long, long time. And the other interesting thing is we think about saliva as being relatively ubiquitous throughout the mouth. And I know that over the course of my career, I've seen it in such a ways that one side of the mouth is perfectly healthy, and the other side of the mouth has all kinds of decay. And as the next slide will illustrate, you can have all kinds of problems in the same mouth. And it's because of a phenomenon called local chemical dissolution. When the salivary glands aren't functioning equally bilaterally, we're going to have more saliva on one side, such as in the areas of tooth number 1 and 2. 1 and 2 basically are healthy tooth structure or early white spot lesions, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the progressive rampant decay that goes on. If you're like me, you've seen something like this along the line. And when you see caries really reactive on one side versus the other, think about this: localized chemical dissolution from an inequality of salivary movement or salivary production from the various salivary glands on one side of the mouth versus the other. Okay, we can go on to the next slide, and then we're getting close to the answers where we can have a good discussion overall. This article in JDR, General Dental Research, a few years back by my good friend Walter Secura and his team looked at the acquired enamel pellicle and how delicate it was and is in the oral cavity, and how it's very important in creating the overall initial level of the biofilm that forms in the oral cavity. And if it's not in balance properly, it's going to set up the toppling of the protective effect of the protective commensals. And sometimes we need to look at the overall acidic food intake, the beverages, the abrasive toothpaste, the whitening products. All of these things we have to keep in mind as far as being part of what could be creating an imbalance in our patient's oral cavity. So if you're asking patients, what toothpaste are they using? Are they using whitening scripts? Are they using anything else that might interfere with creating a really great mature pellicle over the course of time? So we're going on to the next one, next slide. And it basically all comes down to you and I helping to determine whether or not the system of checks and balances in our patient's oral cavity are in line. Because at Forsyth Institute a few years back, we had a conversation regarding the oral microbiome and whether or not that good bacteria can turn into bad bacteria. And as the next slide will illustrate, we do have the opportunity for the good bacteria to become bad, kind of like the Walking Dead, if you're big fans of that TV program. there's situations that can set up in the oral cavity in which good bacteria can be triggered by in the environment to actually become pathogenic bacterium. And so we have to look at that as well, because the mouth is very, very delicate. Next slide is going to go to, and we're going to look at what the FDIC has, the Federation Dentaire Internationale, has created this document, which is a great chair-side guide that can help us all in evaluating our patients with various caries circumstances, or whether or not their protective commensals are in check. And this is free to download from the FDI, and it's co-sponsored by Colgate. It's a really nice document. The next slide, this slide gives you the prevention and management, and this slide gives you some guidance as to the caries risk assessment, the overall professional maintenance considerations, and the overall patient education and maintenance indications. This is a really nice document to have available in your offices to just help you review things and also to share with your patients too. And our final slide that we're going to look at is something that's really very interesting, is water. Most people are drinking bottled water of some capacity or another nowadays. And it's interesting to see on this list that some of our waters aren't necessarily at neutral. Some of them are actually quite acidic, such as Aquafina and Dasani and so many other smart water, vitamin waters, et cetera, and so forth. So if your patient is telling you they're drinking water, that's great. Find out what type of water that they're drinking and figure out whether or not they're drinking good water or not so good water overall. So I toss this out for some ideas, for some comments and discussion as we mastermind Are Your Patients Out of Balance this evening?
All right, I know we have people that have been working in this arena. I mean, all of us have been for our entire careers. And there's no doubt that the statistics have not gotten really any better. So the question becomes to me is, what's the recipe for insanity? Let's keep doing the same stuff. So this last slide, is anybody else aware of this? Have you seen this chart, and where did this chart come from, John?
It's from some research that I've done online over the course of time. There's a lot of folks who are very concerned regarding the quality of water, especially bottled water. And so this, I can try to find out where the sources come from, but it's, when I looked at this and I kept on reviewing it further, there's a lot of fact in this slide. So I will do some further investigation if necessary, but there's been a lot of people who have also tested water with pH liquids to identify it, and they have confirmed just about all of these listings here.
Terrific. I know we have Eric. Eric, are you here? Going to talk? Because Eric, you work a lot with ozone, correct? Is you there, Eric? Thought I saw him. Shirley, is Eric still here?
I thought I do.
I thought I saw him. Yeah, there he is. Eric Zaremski, come on. Talk about ozone in this whole thing. Shirley, and if you have something to say it out loud. Shirley Gutkowski, rather than the chat.
Okay, so, all right, so I found my unmute button. This has been kind of a pinch in my butt for a while. In the presence of good salivary flow, the pH of water shouldn't matter that much, and that this is only a problem when there isn't very much saliva. Is that fair to say?
Well, basically, it's a constant deluge of it. Environmental factors, in my mind, is that if a patient is doing all they can to try to help themselves and they're drinking these waters that are more acidic than neutral, are they necessarily helping themselves, or are they changing the overall environment of the oral microbiome to the side that is going to give them more prevalence or possibility of disease. My thinking here is, why are we tempting fate? Because it only a short period of, we don't know when the tipping point occurs.
Right.
So if we can advise our patients to move away from these waters that aren't as good for them as our other waters like Fiji water, Crystal Geyser, et cetera, and so forth, why not give them that knowledge to help them not go further and further to the tipping point?
The second thing about the waters is that I think we have so much stress and focus on drinking water or drinking period that we've tipped over to the side where it's almost ridiculous. When Weston Price was doing his research, people drank when they were thirsty. They didn't walk around with a thing of water. You don't have to be drinking water every 30 seconds. You don't have to be sipping water. You just drink a glass of water, call it done, and move along. So
I couldn't agree more.
It's a Band-Aid or something.
I couldn't agree more, Shirley. But we're a society of extremes. There's sometimes people are just, if 2 aspirin are good, 4 must be better, and we sometimes put ourselves into situations that we shouldn't be in just because we overthink it, or even worse, think of it improperly. So you're right. I agree with you.
I mean, I've read some articles that even were talking about how we're drowning ourselves, that we're actually washing out too much of the needed minerals and other things that we need. So yeah, this is so it's not just the quality, but it's the quantity is also just as much of an issue to discuss with people.
There's also a lot of discussion in the chat box. People, please speak up. And someone asked for a copy of this slide.
Is there any way that we can get a copy of this slide?
Sure. Shirley can send it out to anybody.
Shirley, you can send it out. Okay, or I can send it out.
Patty can send it out. Sorry. Patty can
They should be able to take a screenshot also.
Yeah. Joy, you have something. Joy Holmes has something in the chat box. Wouldn't it depend on the balance between demineralization and remineralization? It's more than just water and saliva. So expand what you have to say here, Joy. Joy, can you hear?
I'm sorry. Hello, I'm here.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, this was just kind of in response to Shirley's question, saying if it was just healthy saliva, what the pH of the water matter. So I guess my next question, and because of my research, we know that Carrie's process is multifactorial. So it's never just one or two things. It's a combination of things. So just wanted to know if anyone had heard anything different.
No, I would agree with that 100%. There's so many things that can go wrong or go right. It's just sometime or another physiologically, depending on the age of the patient or whatever systemic crisis that they may be going through, then they can become more susceptible than they were before. Stresses, smoking, diabetes, the whole gamut of potential systemic diseases come into play. It's no simple answer, and you're so correct, but we have to be aware of some of the factors that may create that tipping point. And that's my biggest concern, is we don't know when a person might reach that threshold. But if we can help them move away from that edge by just counseling them properly, that might make all the difference in the world.
Do we have any really what we can consider any kind of definitive testing, though? And we know it's going to be a point in time when we test it, but so much of this, it still feels like we're doing the same guessing that we've been doing for a long time, because we can't look at somebody and know what their pH is, or know what their salivary flow is, or know what any of that is. What about some of the tests that are out there? Anybody use
the GC salivary test that's available is a very good one to get a pretty good idea of what resting and active salivary flow is. You can also do salivary testing with pH strips. We do that at the university with patients that we can't seem to get a handle on. and that gives you at least some clues as to what's happening there. So those are two different mechanisms that I personally have used and had some success with.
Anybody else use any other testing systems for the health of the saliva?
I think that if you're not using some kind of a testing system, you're really not doing your job. In order to make a diagnosis, period, you have to have some kind of test to see what the environment is like, although the environment changes pretty rapidly. So I think that that's a really important key to all of this. I'd also like to point out that mouth breathing is another giant piece of this puzzle. And I think more people are mouth breathing than are drinking some of these low pH waters. And oral breathing can also drag the pH down into the pH of 6 range. And that's detrimental as well. And it's much more insidious than blaming the patient because they're drinking water. We also have to look at some of the structural components that lead to oral or dental decay. Tongue ties and lip ties are the tethered oral tissues, I think, are really starting to come into play in this whole discussion.
Great points. All of those are excellent points. And Patty, if you go back 2 slides to that FDI charting, the thing that on that those depictions is risk assessment. We need to do a better job of understanding the caries risk assessment. And on this particular slide here, they go through a lot of important aspects that many of you are already doing, but I don't think a lot of people are doing it all of the time. And as we go to risk assessment for determining caries management, this is going to become more and more crucial. So your points are well taken.
Can I throw something else out here? I think that sometimes frequently, one of the problems is whether it's this arena or perio or head and neck oral cancer is our imprecise language. Now, Shirley and I have been on this hobby horse for a while on the difference between a caries infection and a cavity as the outcome. And fixing the outcome doesn't get rid of the infection. And just, where is that as far as the universities or in people that are doing teaching, are we trying to clean up our language at all when it comes to those kind of differentiations?
Yeah, you're going to see more and more of the IC-DOS classification as illustrated on the left-hand side of this slide, where the teeth are located, whether or not they are actively or not, or inactive lesions. So we are moving to that at the university where I teach now, and I'm pretty sure this is going to become standard as time progresses.
But IC-DOS is really, that's a picture of something that's already occurred. When we're talking about caries infection and salivary health, we're talking about the potential that we want to recognize, treat before we have the evidence of breakdown, right?
Right, and that's where if you see the pictographs on the left-hand side middle aspect, that goes over and it indicates active and inactive decay as well. So that's something that's attempting to be standardized in some fashion.
But isn't there between inactive and active decay health? What's the definition of health and where's that at?
Active and inactive, basically, if you think about it, there can be active decay that goes dormant.
Yes.
And whether or not you treat it when it's dormant or go only after the active decay, that's where the discussion is going on nowadays.
That's where the action is going on. So it's still from a very much of a disease-based point of view, not a health-based point of view.
Correct. We're still trying to combat the disease. And if it's cavitated and it's nicely light brown or brown, that's an active area that you want to get to before it becomes a more detrimental challenge. If it's darker, if it's black, we know that's more or less an arrested situation or an inactive area that may be able to be treated a little bit later, but still needs to be treated nonetheless, because that exposed dentin is so susceptible to the acid environment of the mouth. Remember, the enamel breaks down and demineralizes at 5.5. Dentin will start to demineralize between 6.2 and 6.6. So that little bit of a pH change can be all the difference between health and disease in the dentin exposed regions of the tooth.
Again, if I can get Eric on here, because Eric, I'd love to have you talk about ozone, because a lot of times the treated lesions with ozone have a similar look. Am I right? Eric. Shirley, you can jump in for Eric if he's not going to talk.
Yes, so you can arrest the decay with ozone, but you're still just treating one part of the tooth that's showing an infected part. For every tooth that you see that has a visible lesion by eye, are thousands of new lesions developing that you cannot see, which is why I've always been opposed to the icy DOS. It's too late, it's too slow, and it relies on dental eyes. And we need a better option for this. With ozone, you can do a number of things to all of the teeth at once if you use ozone trays. In a dental office, using ozonated water, it can be helpful, but you're still dealing with a topical application for what is looking to be a systemic problem, and that systemic health may be exhibiting itself as a dental decay problem. So that piece also isn't evidenced here in this FDI paper.
Points well taken. That there's certainly a lot of good information there for sure. But the question and the problem is that currently all clinicians are being trained to do, as you just said, treat the disease after it's manifest. How do we move that model? What model do you recommend that we look further toward, Shirley, in order to change this directionality that we're in right now?
You ask as though I may not know the answer.
No, I know you probably do, and I'd love to learn about it. That's why. Question, as they say in Brooklyn.
Here's the part. Let me bring in. Can I throw in a coding part here, Shirley?
Yeah, please.
From a coding perspective, since this is dental codology, my bigger goal with all of this is not, I don't love codes, guys. It is not about codes and reimbursement. And I think people that know me well know that my main goal in putting together and even looking at the coding aspect is because actually it's the FDI. They had a goal. I don't know if they still have it written anywhere, but they had a goal at one time. Their 2020 goal was to have a caries-free world. Now that's a darn high goal, okay? And again, Shirley and I and many others have been at this playing in this game for a long time. And the thing is that if that's, I think, is the absolute initial place we have to start. Is if our goal is to manage disease, all we're going to do is manage disease. But if our goal is to have a caries-free world, first of all, we have to internalize that that's even possible. And for most of us, because of our educational background and our current systems, we can't even believe that could be possible. So it's the entertainment of the idea of it, because unless we believe that it's possible, then how is it that we're going to find the ways to test, to measure, to evaluate? Because our evaluation tools are to find a hole and fix a hole. So from a coding perspective, and that's where I'm going with this, is codes represent really important metrics. And the metrics is where we're going to be able to have measurability in a system that can take us in a different direction. We are currently all compensated on the sicker somebody gets, the more we get compensated. And there is a move to change it to outcome based. In other words, the healthier people get is where compensation comes in. Now that actually strikes fear in a whole lot of people because it is such a different way of looking at it. But that's where my work in codes is all about, is to have the measurability of it. But it isn't just the codes that are going to have the measurability. We have to have systems and testing systems to take it out of this fuzzy realm of, oh, good saliva, bad saliva, because there's a hole or not. Because that's where we've been stuck for a long time. So I'm on my hobby horse. I know I am. One of my favorites.
But I still
Joy?
want to hear Shirley's model.
So I think Patty's right in that we're all measuring kind of the wrong thing. So we learn all about how caries develops before we get out of school, and we're all tested on it with our national boards and all this stuff. And then we get out and it's all about the surface. So I really support the Canberra method. Unfortunately, they're still in this icy DOS thing. I've talked to Dr. Young about that a number of times. And and as new things develop, though, they're still in this dentist on teeth model. So when you bring them, for instance, I emailed with Dr. Featherstone a couple of times about these structural components, and he wants more research. And of course, there's never going to be enough research if all the money that is being focused right now on fluoride research were to be disseminated and put to vitamin D research and to the structural components as part of this. This needs to be taught in the schools and then brought under an umbrella of caries management so that it's not pushed aside or it's not ignored as part of a treatment plan. That mouth breathing is considered, that vitamin D levels are measured, that brushing
sleep is not being considered in
sleep
there.
is not considered, right?
Right. Yep.
So it's
I like the directionality that you're going there. So keep on going. You're making me smart.
all of these things need to be part of this pie of dental decay. And we have to keep looking backwards and then apply what had happened in the past and got either swept under the rug or just ignored just because of time constraints. The works, like I was mentioning before, of Dr. Weston Price, whose book came out in 1939, right before World War II. So guess what happened to that book? And then Pottinger and his cats, and the terrible crisis that happened in those generations of cats, which we see if we look around us in the population. Dr. Kevin Boyd and his Darwinian dentistry approach, looking at the structural changes that have manifested over time in the structures of the face and how much smaller the face has gotten, which isn't matched in the size of the teeth. And that's why it looks like we have to take teeth out in order to get teeth straight. It's all of those kind of things need to have a higher profile in dental school and dental hygiene school. And then we need to have these giant group practices, these DSOs, be on board with that and show how they can also make money doing it. All of the new dental school graduates are going into this DSO model. They can't afford to buy their own practice. They can go on with Uncle Joe, but Uncle Joe has his own way of doing things and doesn't want anything new. So these DSOs really have to glom onto this, and we have to show them how it can be profitable for them to not miss all of these other pieces.
Can I ask a question of the group? There are 3 caries risk assessment codes. There's only 3, but the 3 specific ones, and it was the Canberra people that came to the coding committee that asked for them. How many of you are using them? And if you are using them, can you share with the group how you're using them?
No.
Do I hear crickets?
Crick, 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 crick.
Guys, I got to remember, I know you guys, so I'm gonna pick on you. I'm gonna ask you specifically. Paige, you're out on the West Coast, and on the West Coast, often things go a little faster and a little quicker than they do in other parts of the country. In the practice that you work in, or practices, are you guys using any specific risk assessment? And if you are, what are you using? And what about the code? Paige?
Sorry, you cut out the last sentence that you said. And if you could repeat the specific question, what are we doing on the West Coast about?
Risk assessment. What kind of risk assessment are you
assessment?
doing specifically, and are you using the codes?
I am fighting to get the codes used in our practice because they need to be used. My biggest nemesis is the front desk staff. My dentist totally understands. I'm the one that does any risk assessment, and he just kind of, yeah, and and I base my preventive recommendations to people based on Cambria. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. So with the whole thing on working with the dentist, you guys have staff meetings. Do you talk about it? Do you talk about the profitability aspect of it, or we just doesn't go anywhere? You don't. I mean,
Well,
what's the
I talk about it, and we, tell him what basically I've told the patient. Basically, he leaves it up to me, a lot of it.
Okay.
And I'm the one getting out the care review, things like that, to see what's active, what's not active, what we can watch, what is cavitated, things like that, and pointing it out to him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really good at not jumping in to fix anything, which I appreciate with him. And, our recommendations, I've gotten him off the whole fluoride. We need to throw more fluoride at it, onto more broad ways of helping a patient get balance in their mouth again. But I'm the one that brings that all there. I don't know how other offices work so much. Usually on the West Coast, we're pretty much right up there. I know there's a ton of research coming out of the UW with certain people out there with prevention. Names are escaping me right now, but I think the area is pretty forward thinking in a lot of it. I don't hear much about ozone at all here in Washington. So I'm the one that got him to start using SDF. And my front desk hates me because I want her to code for Carrie's risk. I can't put it in on my computer on our program, so I have to ask her to do it.
You only are limited to the codes that you can use in your treatment room?
Our program is a local program. It's not like Dentrix, or it's not like, all these big ones. It's a local program that's sold in the Seattle area. And I cannot access that. She can put anything in at the front desk. It's something I'm working on, but it's a control issue that I'm trying to deal with and trying to be diplomatic about it so that I don't start some kind of a war. But, even just asking her to put in and code for the care review images, and we just got a DigiDoc coding for the those images and things like that. I'm just kind of hitting a cement wall on that, and I'm working on it.
So
no, I think one of the things I think that Paige really hits on here is she's talking about using care review to try to quantify decay. The biggest problem is that none of our instrumentation quantifies it that we currently use. The only instrument out there that really is pretty decent in quantifying it, if you have enough time to use it properly, is the Canary system. Everything else is kind of a judgmental from an image that you're taking. And even Diagnodent is problematic because of what kind of plaque might be in there, giving a false reading. But the problem is that Canary is so cumbersome. You can only do so much with it because you can only look at a 1 millimeter wide by area at a time, and the tooth is pretty big, and you have to do a lot of different 1 millimeters and doing it in different directions to get it. And I love Steve Abrams; he's a darn good friend, but the Canary is the only instrument that quantifies demineralization. Everything else is kind of a guessing game. So I think going back to how do we quantify and understand what's going on, to Shirley's point, we don't have the instrumentation that can do that effectively at this point in time.
But aren't those other technologies, whether it's the Spectra, the SopraCare, the Diagnodent, whatever, it still is it's using those comes from a different point of view, because the way I characterize it is it's at least looking for something on early changes, not just for a hole to fix. Whereas stay with our gold standard Explorer, which depending on whose research you use, you look at, it's any from what, 25 to 45% effective? Yeah, we
Explorers,
get 100% effectiveness for our other technologies before we use them?
explorers are completely useless instruments. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with the other instrumentation is that we're basing it on fluorescence for the most part. And fluorescence is good, but it's not accurately able to quantify what's going on.
But in
And
addition
that's the
to
issue.
when you're working with somebody who has only used radiographs and you're looking at
Right.
interproximal lesions,
Right.
or even I'm finding a lot of the occlusal grooves that are stained looking is their decay. I would much rather use that Carry View. I won't use an Explorer, but the Diagnodent, I really hate it too.
Right.
So this
Right.
is what I've got available to
Yeah.
use, and it's better than my eyesight. It's better than the Explorer. It's better than this, and so that's what we're doing right now. But most of the time, we're finding we're watching more, or we're doing some SDF.
And I love the Carry View because it's basically transillumination on steroids. It really is a great instrument that you can capture the shadowing that's going on. It's a beautiful instrument, but from if you're trying to quantify what's really going on there, that instrument cannot by itself do it.
Right?
Which is
Yeah.
a darn shame, because we
It's-
need an instrument that can show us not only that the lesion is there, but how invasive it is or active it isn't, or et cetera and so forth. So we're struggling with that right now.
Right, but and it's giving us more information than we had, and it's
Correct.
a piece of the puzzle
Correct.
that is helping us be more conservative.
I want to go back to the chat box. Lisa, you wrote down that you only make notes in your chart but not use the code. Is there a reason why that is? Same thing with Renee. You wrote the same thing. You're not using the code. Is there a reason why the codes are not being used?
Can I give an answer to that?
I got an answer. Go ahead.
Because it's not required for payment.
It's not required for payment?
No. At this point in time, there's no need to code for the risk assessment, because right now everything is still being paid as it is. But when and if Snowdent comes into existence and we do use medical coding, then every dentist in the entire world is going to have to stand on their head and learn diagnostic codes.
I agree, but I'm gonna agree with that last part, but I'm gonna disagree with the other part, in that the codes are there, and the codes, now this is not an ADA or a coding committee term, but those codes are modifier codes. Now in medical, that's a very common thing that you have modifier codes, in other words,
Right.
that help support other codes. Right now, we have those curious risk assessment codes are modifier codes. There might not be payment under those specific codes, but they give a reason for other treatment that we're rendering. Additionally, how we code affects the future of coding and the future of payment, in that, and again, some people have heard me tell this story over and over, but let me throw it out there. For many years, many people use antibacterial irrigation as part of their perio protocol. I can argue that from till cows come home, but whether or not, I agree with it or not, many people use it. So what happened is we didn't have a code per se. So the only code, when there's always a code that can be used, and it's one of the 999 codes. So that's the 4999, unspecified perio procedure by report. Now, by report means it requires a narrative. That narrative is to describe the care that you rendered, although it really should be for the dental medical necessity for the care. Anyway, in 2013, the NADP, which is the National Association of Dental Plans, came to the committee for a unique code just for antibacterial irrigation. Part of their argumentation is that it was submitted over 500,000 times under the 499 in 2012 alone. So that code, although codes, and see, this is the problem, codes have so traditionally just been thought about for payment, but they're supportive codes for the treatment that we're rendering. And that's where these curious risk assessment codes are really important. Plus, my experience is that when we're really doing curious risk assessment, as the Canberra model really teaches it, it's there. We have a majority of our patients at risk, high risk, and moderate risk.
Agreed. No question.
But until we have that some way of quantification, and when I'm saying quantification, I'm just talking about the number of people that we have at high risk, the number, and I still have problems with the words high and moderate and low because those are fuzzy words too, but the codes exist. Now, I'm going to, we get some more comments here. I don't know why you guys aren't talking and make me read these. Bree, you said I try to walk out codes and they don't even have it in their practice management software. Talk about that because this is what this Mastermind is about. Let's talk about the challenges that we're facing when we try to do this stuff. So Bree. Bree? Can't hear you.
I do want to start off by saying, like a year ago, talking about a Senate competitive seat.
I can't hear anything. Can anybody else?
I hear the election.
Gary.
In the Senate election is one of the worst. That's right.
We can't hear you. Sorry.
Yeah, she can't get the audio working, she says.
Yeah, she can't get the audio working. Okay.
This is Renee. Just to comment on that for my practice. I've brought it up multiple times and it gets shot down. So it's like, oh, and once again, I think from a maybe I don't even want to step on anybody's toes, but on a dentist perspective, they don't see the need for it. So it's one more thing to code. And then like it was brought up before, front desk says, oh, that's one more thing we got to enter in. And they don't do the entering of it even. So it's just frustrating. But we're not there yet. I keep bringing it up.
If you restrict payment without a code, then they'll start using it. That's the bottom line. If they can continue to get away without needing to put in a risk assessment code to be paid, they're going to do it. That's what's going to be the tipping point at that point in time, which seems to be my word for the day, the tipping point. And until the insurance companies crack down, they're going to just dentists will continue to do what they've been always doing because there's nothing to make them do otherwise. Speaking for my colleagues and the dental profession, of course.
Okay, so Teresa Shepard, please. Teresa Shepard, she has something to say in the chat box too.
Yes, hello. How does that play into the standard of care?
Excellent question.
Thank you.
It really is, because if we are not assessing risk before we treat, are we over-treating or under-treating? So that is a question that really needs to be addressed by the profession as a whole. If we are not properly assessing risk, how are we properly treating?
Well, how about the diagnosis? Are we even diagnosing? Are we just doing stuff? I mean, that's the other part. You brought up Snowdent and the idea of making diagnosis codes, but even by coding perspective right now, it says the diagnosis is part of an evaluation code. So that to me, from a risk management standard of care that Teresa is bringing up here, is we're required to write a diagnosis now, but we don't. And part of that diagnosis is risk.
Right. And the problem I have in teaching risk management and doing audits and things on people, and I'm trying to explain to them that, you know, this could be an area that you might be considered either supervised neglect or operating below the standard of care, and which makes perfect sense if you look at it from strictly a risk management standpoint. But sometimes I get pushback saying, well, who said that? Whose standard? Where are the regulations?
And what is that answer? What is that answer, Teresa?
May or may not be.
What is that answer? Where do standards come from? What is a standard of care?
Well, what I always explain to them is there are standards of care that are put forth by ADA and CDA in our state, whatever state you are, and you're going to be judged on what your peers do. And
I think it goes beyond that. A standard of care is usually I mean, from my understanding, is usually determined in a court of law. But where would lawyers and judges go for what would be a standard for a profession? Yeah, it would be what is in publication by the professional associations, whether it's ADA, ADHA, ADAA, ADIMQRST. I mean,
Right. Well, it's just because the same with coding. If you don't pocket chart on a perio patient or, any adult patient really, I mean, that's below the standard of care. Oral cancer screenings, you don't do them, it's below the standard of care.
And standard of care is basically entrenched in ethics. And
right.
whether you are being an ethical practitioner of the dental arts, enabling to make sure that you are doing no harm, even though we don't take a Hippocratic oath or hypocritic oath, depending on if you're in politics. The reality here is that we're bound to do the right thing as professionals. And if we cut corners, we're being unethical, unprofessional, and working, as you stated, below the standard of care.
Exactly.
And I'll submit that there's even an aspect that it could be argued that CDT is part of that standard. Why? Because in 2001, CDT was identified as the standard code set for dentistry and electronic health records. That's why even if a practice takes no dental benefits at all or any kind of third-party reimbursement, our record keeping, and this goes to those of you that you can't get your business people and the front desk professionals to get it in the charts. The thing is that your electronic health records should be up to the standard of care. And if you did that care and there's a code that exists, you should be using that code. So this is where it's not, I think one of the other issues is that we've been working in our little cottage industry silos and we get to do whatever we want, wherever we want. And that hasn't helped us. It really hasn't.
Patty?
Yeah.
Adela has a comment in the chat box.
Okay, Adela, talk, girlfriend.
And it's a good one.
I want to see it.
I'm mostly behind the scenes because I'm all talked out. I coach people for a living, so it's refreshing to hear everybody talk for a change. But what I was just driving home is that as a dental consultant in an RDH, my job is to set programs and systems that would eventually lead the practice to success and to become more efficient. And I start at the beginning with everything, beginning from, doing an all points periodontal assessment and everything. You'll be surprised how the basics are basically dropped in private practice. I teach at an NSU also, and at NSU, going from an educational background to private practice is a total, night and day kind of thing. So I'm so used to coding Canberra for the students and all that, and then you go and coach a dental office that doesn't do anything. But what I typically see is that starts from the top. Once you actually sell the concept to the business owner dentist, they actually see how they're actually being deficient and below the standard of care. But they have to buy it, own it, embrace it, and then everybody else follows. Then you wouldn't have the pushback in the front. So what we need to do is basically be more effective of getting to where it's at. We need to make sure that the person on top knows that this is what is best for the practice and for the patient. If we don't get to that point, then nobody else is going to follow. And you'll always be confronting the pushback. And that's what I'm up against as a consultant. When we start out with systems, a lot of them start to go, well, what is that going to do to us, But it's a matter of just embracing it and knowing that that's what's the best for the practice. And that's what I often encounter. Once the dentists hire me to, improve the bottom line. And so when they start to see that everything is more efficient, then they start to actually, equate that with dollars and cents and time management. And it makes sense. It just makes sense.
So Adela, what would be your suggestion for those that have shared so honestly and openly, and thank you so much for doing it, that when they're trying to get these codes used for risk assessment and they get pushback from the business professionals, how do they deal with it? What's some ideas that they could utilize and take back to the practice just from a conversation?
I try to make it so it's a lot easier for them and they don't have to be scrambling at what to use. So, we start with their back first, and I work out with the actual codes, and they're actually in each operatory, and we talk about them in the morning huddle, and we discuss things in Q&A so that people feel comfortable using it. Most of the time is the fact that they have not used them, they're not really knowledgeable about them. They don't know how to apply them, and they don't know which code is for what, and they feel uncomfortable asking because they think that they're gonna sound dumb or whatever. So it's about making it comfortable to open conversation, and I actually have all those codes written down, and every single operatory has them. So it's a matter of when we start to launch it, we say, okay, effective this day, we're gonna start to do this. And I have the SOAP model for progress notes. So it is incorporated into the SOAP, and it is actually something that all they have to do is check a button instead of creating a whole narrative. So all of that has to be customized, and my job is to basically customize those progress notes, and so it's a lot easier. It's streamlined for them. So it's systems. Systems is the answer to that.
I hear you. Can I challenge one thing though? Just a thought process. Is systems are good, but when we have pre-written narratives, are they accurate? Because is not every single patient that we have unique in and of themselves? And when we have pre-done narratives, how many can we have that it doesn't turn out to be?
They're basically narratives that are tailored to every single situation. So it's not just one narrative. There's a narrative for one code, another for the other, and for the other. So they actually basically choose the one that needs to be done, and it applies to that patient. Okay. So it's not just one narrative fits all.
Do we have any other comments? Thank you so much, Adela. We're thrilled that you're here. We appreciate. By the way, if somebody put the link into the chat box for to download this thing that we're looking at here on the screen. John, do you have any final comments?
Yes, Patty.
Yeah.
Linda Gurutowski here. There's many cases that you end up using some dental codes and some medical codes. Like if we're dealing with a true TMJ case, it has to be under medical. We don't have, a dental code that covers a lot of the things that needs to be done with a true TMJ case. And, especially if they have a lawyer involved, you must use medical codes in that instance, because attorneys do not understand the dental codes. And then when we're doing the, our regular assessment in that regarding dentistry, then we're back to our dental codes. So it sort of gets convoluted, but we are using two sets of codes.
Absolutely. We're going to actually end up using a lot more than two sets of codes, which is a transition again, just to remind everybody that is the subject that we'll be taking on at our mastermind next month. So John, I want to respect everybody's time. So do you have any final comments here?
No, I'm just delighted to be part of this discussion, this thing, to stimulate this great group of people. And it's really refreshing to be with you all. So thank you kindly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for leading this. The future is ours to create, and I know we're up to it. I know this is the group of leaders that will do it. So we are stronger together. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Again, if I can help in any way, you know how to find me. Text me, email, Facebook, instant messenger. I hope you all got your name in the chat box so that you can get your continuing education credit. Again, John, thank you so very much, and thank you to all you guys. So good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Good night.